The Browns are gritty. Everything that happened to this team says they shouldn't make the playoffs. Nick Chubb goes down a couple weeks in. Deshaun Watson goes down. You go through DTR. You're trying different quarterback options. Then you land on Joe Flacco. And oh, guess what? We know he's not a long-term option. I won't step too much on the toes of this quarterback segment that we'll go into. But he turns the ball over a ton. We've got issues. There's a lot to break down here. And we will start with the ever so complicated situation of the quarterback. I'm not a big fan. Dylan is a borderline hater. I don't even think it's borderline. He hates this going forward. There's not a lot to like in Cleveland when you talk about the quarterback situation. I'll start with the numbers and not the stats, but money. What a disaster they have going on with Deshaun Watson right now. There are going to be people out there who go, well, look what Joe Flacco did the last month and a half. It's a no-brainer. Why would you not go with him? I can give you 92 million reasons why you would not go with him. $92 million is the base salary without incentives. That is the minimum amount of money that Deshaun Watson will make in the next 2 years. $46 million a year. The Flacco run was fun, but he threw those 8 picks in 5 games. And in my opinion, long term, we have to sit with the fact that the Browns have one answer and one answer only for the next few years, and it's the guy they paid a ton of money to. What do you got on this? You don't seem like a big fan.
Yeah, just the instability at the position. Like, Flacco was fine, but he's not a viable fantasy option. He is a viable quarterback. I think he proved that, but he's not a viable fantasy option by any means. And, like, Watson just looked awful early on. And I'll be honest, this is my hot take. I don't think he's the guy in Cleveland. I think they really screwed up by not only giving him a full guaranteed contract, but also a long-term contract, because now you're stuck with him. They're in this chokehold right now where they can't really move a quarterback, but they should, because I don't think he's the option here.
And they're financially tied down. So they have this huge commitment. And I completely agree with what you said. Like, all of a sudden, you look at his performance the last couple of years. You look at the fact he's putting up some of the worst numbers of his career. You look at the fact they've committed so much money to this dude. And, yeah, he might have to be the answer in terms of who they're putting on the field. But fantasy-wise, as you can see, by my rating and Dylan's rating, you should not have to invest in this guy. You are not financially tied to him, nor should you be. We'll go to the running backs, as is usually the case with teams like this, where they don't have the best quarterback play, but somehow they make the playoffs. The run game's got to be good. I've got B+. Nick Chubb is legendary. Over 5 yards per carry in his career. He's had a year with over 6 yards per carry. Almost every year he's gone over 1,000 yards. I'm scared of that injury. That is the only reason I'm not where you are right now. And I'm sure you'll bring it up a bit. It's one of the ugliest injuries I've seen, and I would put it second behind the injury he had at Georgia, where he hurt, I believe, the same leg, and it looked just as ugly. I've got B+. Jerome Ford held his own. I'm worried at this stage of his career, so I'm down to like an 8.5 in terms of my confidence level.
Yeah, I'm at an A- here just because Nick Chubb's a baller, and if you have a baller, they're going to find a way to get on the field. He's a really good yard per carry option. I just hope that the injury doesn't devalue him a ton, because with a scary injury like that, you're going to find a way to devalue someone. And like you mentioned, Ford looked good with the added role he needed to take on. I thought he filled in perfectly. And Kareem Hunt is still there, and he's a solid receiving back, a really good complement to Chubb and Ford's style of running, that ground and pound running game. So I think that all 3 options here would be viable fantasy options if you're in a deeper league and you need a running back and Ford is there. Maybe bench him because of Chubb's injury history. Then you can have a solid back if Chubb goes down again. And I just think Kareem Hunt is going to get his touches.
I kind of like the backup plan there. Like, look, we don't want to bank on a Nick Chubb injury, but we've seen a couple ugly ones over the first few years of his career. One before he went professional and one this past year. Maybe, just maybe, because of what we saw out of Jerome Ford, we can have him in our back pocket in those dynasty leagues, in those, deeper leagues, super flex, where we have an expanded bench as well. I like that a lot. We'll go to a not so strong section, but this team still gets by. Wide receivers for the Browns, I've got C+. Amari Cooper had a monster, franchise record-setting performance. He went well over 200 yards, won a lot of people their fantasy leagues because of it, because it was in their postseason. but kind of similar to other teams we talked about, like the Ravens, for example. Sharp drop off from Amari Cooper to your wide receiver, too. It's supposed to be Elijah Moore. Injuries throughout. We've got Donovan Peoples-Jones. We've got Marquise Goodwin, who's up there in age as well, former Olympian, pretty cool. But in general, in terms of productivity, there's a huge drop-off here. Amari Cooper is shouldering the load. Take him out of here and put someone else in there who's not a 1,000-yard wide receiver. This could be a D or an F. Yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, Amari Cooper balled out. No change in production from him while there was a change at the helm of the quarterback position. He played amazing. And like you mentioned, that drop-off, like, did anyone forget that Elijah Moore wanted out of New York, where he was arguably a rising talent, and now he's kind of just lost in the shuffle? Like, I think Peoples-Jones is a better option than Elijah Moore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not in the best situation either, right? He converts from one place where the quarterback play is not great, and he goes to the Browns, and when he leaves the Jets, they get a future Hall of Famer who ironically gets his number 8, and gets hurt anyway. I mean, the ship kind of sinks over in New York. Yeah, definitely a sharp drop-off. I'd be interested to see, because Donovan Peoples-Jones at the tail end of 2022 goes on this crazy run down the stretch. Looks pretty good, has some production. We will move on to the tight end position, and pretty nice surprise. Not out of left field. David Njoku is who we're mainly going to be talking about here. 6th in the league in tight end receiving yards. Harrison Bryant, another 3 touchdowns to his name. This is another team that, again, ground and pound, likes to get downhill, will utilize their tight ends not just in blocking situations, but also in rollouts. They're good receivers. Njoku really caught fire down the stretch. And you've got A-, so we pretty much align in the same spot.
Yeah, the only reason I've got just a grade below her is because while Njoku played amazing down the stretch, the only reason his production increased was with Flacco. If you look at his numbers early on in the year, they're not as good as when Flacco took over. And Watson doesn't typically like to go to tight ends. So that's my hesitation to giving them an A. And the same is said for Harrison Bryant, the production value when Flacco's on the field compared to Deshaun Watson.
So that's fair. You're kind of taking a long-term approach, which we should be doing. We should be looking forward. We know where the money is. It's going into Watson. He will likely, barring any health concerns, be out there. Maybe he doesn't target the tight end position as much, and all of a sudden, Njoku, instead of getting in the high 800s, maybe fluctuates back down to like 600, 700, which by all means, for the tight end market, specifically because we know Travis Kelce's getting older, George Kittle's getting older, other names are getting older, it's not a bad place to be. It's just not that firm A. I like that. We'll go to the defense. Definitely a strength here. I've got A. You've got B+. 3rd in fantasy points this season on that like standard scale where you're, again, going over the scoring. More a team scores, you go down 2 points for interceptions, fumbles, and then you get, of course, a point for each sack. And this team will rack up a lot of those when they have somebody like Myles Garrett, an absolute beast, 88.5 sacks in his career, 14 this season. A lot to like about him. And we talked about the run game shouldering the load and being one of the main reasons, along with the little magical Joe Flacco run, that this team went into the playoffs. I think the defense has a lot to do with it, too. What do you have on them?
Yeah, the defense, Myles Garrett is going to get you sacks, and the secondary is not bad at all means. Plus, that secondary not being horrible, and the receiving division, like, as a whole, is not very good in the AFC North, so I'm kind of inclined to go with the Browns just because their secondary is stronger than most receiving cores in this division, and they play each other twice, so it adds value in that sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as we look at this report card, I think this describes the Browns pretty well. There is no place other than quarterback where you can really call them a disaster. There's a lot of respectable areas. And of course, the grit and the grime, when you say those 2 G words in football, you're thinking of running the ball downhill and you're thinking of defense. That's where they excel.